Out of anchorage, just madness. There is no sleep the night before, 2 nights before. Trying to get everything ready, no sleep or rest. The food is all shipped to 20 checkpoints across the state. The dogs are trucked into downtown Anchorage to the staging area on 4th Street, where there is ridiculously no snow, and they must bring it in. Because the snow is shallow, the sleds cut through to bare asphalt, so there is no steering, no real control. The dogs are insane to run. We pull number 32, about middle of the 70-team race, and the dogs get to stand and watch 31 teams to go out ahead of them. Out and down 4 blocks to turn sharp right and head out of the downtown section. 31 teams to watch, and then they take us into the chutes, and the dogs know it is our time. They lunge and tear and pull and scream until they count us down and we are released. Some new dogs, some old. Cookie is there, and Storm, and Fonzie, and Columbia and Yogi from the work team, and the new dogs that I almost don't know yet. Forward. They blow out of the chute so hard that my arms are jerked nearly out of the sockets, and I cannot believe they are the same 15 dogs I have trained, have run so many times before. I am as nothing on the rear of the sled, nothing. We pound the 4 blocks in a heartbeat. I know we cannot make the turn, and we don't. The dogs sweep around. There is a moment when there seems to be control, and then I roll over and over, but hang on to the sled somehow and slide out of downtown Anchorage on my face, dragging on the back of the sled like garbage. Only the sled and the dogs on the team matter. So little is known of the other teams until much later, after the first 3 days. Some do not make it out of Anchorage. One musher breaks an arm, another a shoulder. 5 blocks out they must watch, and they must scratch, and that is the worst, to scratch. Before the race it is spoken of as a disease. I am a leper. I will scratch. It is the same. Many will, but nobody wants to. Everyone wants to finish. I regain control of the team, get back upright on the runners, and somehow get out of Anchorage. It is still not real, a dream. Finally, out of the chutes, really starting to run the Iditarod, the dream, the run. And it's all phony. The show start in Anchorage is done for television and to give Anchorage publicity. Teams can't truly go from Anchorage to Nome because the freeway system coming into Anchorage blocks the trail. The whole first start, the madness of it, the chutes, all has to be done over. 30 miles out of town is the suburb of Eagle River, where the dogs are put into trucks and taken 11 miles to Settlers Bay, where the true race starts. More chutes, more slamming and screaming and waiting for the front teams to leave, and again, madness. The dogs blow out of the starting chutes and scramble for speed, and this is it, into the bush, directly into the wilderness. But this sham start and restart has taken all day, and so the race truly starts at the end of the day, close to dark. With the darkness comes chaos. The teams will not rest this first night. They are too excited and must be allowed to run until they settle in. So the darkness brings a particular insanity of passing teams and tangles and moose. My team stops dead in the dark, and I go up to investigate the reason and find my leader. Some run 2 leaders, but I favor one, a sweet but simple dog named Wilson. I am trying to get him to lead so I can save Cookie for later, and I find him with his head between the back legs of a moose, frozen with terror. The moose, a large cow, turns to look at me when my headlight comes across her, then turns away. I do not have a gun and do not know what to do. "What are you waiting for?" a voice demands suddenly from the rear as another team runs up on mine in the dark. "Why are you stopped?" "There's a moose," I yell lamely back. "Well, kick it in the butt and get moving or get out of the way." I try kicking the moose in the left flank, and to my amazement she jumps and moves slowly off the trail so we can pass. Later in the race I will try this again, and the second moose will jump on me instead of off the trail, making my life very interesting for about 5 seconds. And on. In the confusion, my leader gets lost and takes a wrong turn while I am looking down into the sled bag, and we go 40, 50 miles in the wrong direction, up into some canyons where the trail gets narrower and narrower until it finally just stops. I got up to the front of the team in the darkness and dragged them around, realizing we are lost. My clothes have been ripped on tree limbs and my face is bleeding from cuts, and when I look back down the side of the mountain we have just climbed, I see 27 headlamps bobbing up the trail. 27 teams have taken our smell as the valid trail and are following us. 27 teams must be met head on in the narrow bush and passed and told to turn around. It is a nightmare. The whole crazy night, turning teams, stopping fights, yelling at dogs, and waiting in armpit-deep snow until finally we are back on the right trail, and at last, just before dawn, I can stand it no longer. 3 nights now without sleep, and I pull the team off on a narrow turnoff and sit on the sled to rest, to doze. I was not there 10 minutes lying back with my eyes closed, and I heard footsteps in the snow. An older man who is famous stood next to me in the darkness and smiled down and said, "Would you like a chocolate chip cookie?" Wonderfully, incredibly, miraculously, he has somehow gotten 2 chocolate chip cookies through that mad night without breaking them. He handed me one, and I sat up and poured tea from my thermos into my cup, and his, and we drank the tea and dunked the cookies and did not talk, but just sat. I looked at my watch and found that it was exactly 24 hours since we were in the staging area in downtown Anchorage waiting to get into the starting chute. It is the end of the first day. Day 2. At dawn, we break out into the open, thick, dark forest and are treated to a spectacular sight. The sun coming over our right rear lights up the entire Alaska Range across our front. There are no clouds, and the mountains, McKinley on the right, towering over us in dazzling white enormity, filling the sky while the sun warms our backs and the dogs settle into running. The madness of the night is gone. The front end teams, the faster runners, have moved on, and we, the dogs and I, are left to get down to the business of running, better than 1,000 miles. It is a strange thing to do. The dogs are magnificent. They are the true athletes of the Iditarod. The dogs continually cause wonder with their endurance, joy, and intelligence. They have tremendous needs. They must feed on a snack every hour or so, and 3 or more hot meals a day. Their shoulders must be rubbed every hour, and they must be allowed to shake the lactic acid buildup out of their joints each hour. And their feet. God, their feet. I am being pulled by 15 dogs that make 60 feet to be taken care of, to be watched and rubbed with ointment and covered with booties if need be. So much time will be spent on my knees that I have sewn half-inch foam pads into my pants at the knees to keep my knees from freezing when I kneel into the snow. And in this business of running, this whole business of getting started and settling down to taking care of the dogs, in the tension and the speed of the race, I do not notice we start climbing, beginning the long run up into the mountains. We move through the day up some frozen rivers and across some frozen lakes, and when it gets dark again, we come into the first of the 20 checkpoints. Noise and pandemonium, dog teams coming and going, judges and spectators all around. Small planes landing on the ice and taking off. The dogs cannot rest because of the noise. I get my sacks of food and we head up the river a bit to be alone, but still, they do not rest. They sit and watch other teams coming and going, watch the planes taking off over us. Even in the dark, in the willows at the side of the river, it is crowded. A man with a team wanders in circles out in front of me, the dogs running around and around on the ice, jumping from one snowmobile trail to the next and circling back, confused by all the trails and the darkness. Everybody is confused. When it is clear the dogs will not rest, I hook up their tugs and we start off again. We luckily find the right trail, and as we leave the checkpoint, the man whose team was wandering follows us out. That night passes us again in confusion. Teams pass us, we pass other teams. I stop to rest the dogs again, but they still will not sleep. Won't, indeed, for 2 more nights. So I let them run. The snow is unbelievably deep. When I stop them and run alongside the team at one point to work on their feet, I mistakenly step off the trail and go up into my armpits in snow. I have to crawl out, grabbing at the dogs and using them for an anchor. And my brain fries the second night. Sleep deprivation catches me and I start hallucinating. We've been warned about that in the briefings, along with frostbite, wind, whiteouts, wind, intense cold, and finally, wind. But nothing can prepare you for your first hallucination in the race because they are not dreams, not something from sleep or delirium. The intensity of the race, the focused drive of it makes for a kind of exhaustion in the musher not found in training. The hallucinations seem to roar at you. They come while you are awake, come with your eyes open, and are completely real. There's a small bit of snow that spurts in from each dog's foot as they run, a little white jet, and that turns in my mind to flame. I see my dogs all running in flame, their feet and lower legs on fire. Terrified, I set the snow hook and run up to put the fire out, lean down to put the flames out, and of course they disappear. They're not there. But the vision comes again and again until at last I somehow reconcile myself by thinking it is all right because the flames do not hurt the dogs. I am amazed that they can run in liquid fire and not feel pain or get injured. The hallucinations do not go away. Indeed, they get more complicated. Often I nearly get lost by going up rivers that aren't there, following lights that do not exist. At one point I have a man sitting on my sled. He is wearing a trench coat and a pair of horn-rimmed glasses, and he's holding a manila folder full of official-looking papers. I watch. He turns up to look at me. He is very distinct. I can see the wrinkles in the fabric of his coat, my own reflection in his glasses. He turns to look at me and begins to speak in a low voice about federal education grants. He is the most boring human being I've ever met, as dull as thick mud, and he goes on until at last I yell at him to shut up. The dogs stop and look back at me, and of course I am alone. It is only in the night when the hallucinations are bad, between 11 and 4 in the morning, and I will not learn how to truly control them for another day and a half. The night drags on forever as the dogs keep trotting, and I reel in and out of sleep on the back of the sled. But at long last it is dawn. There is cold now at dawn, deep cold. It is perhaps 50 below. And I come alongside a musher whose teeth are chattering, a bad sign, while he tries to get a fire going. Cold, he says, the word a benediction. I nod from the closed tunnel of my parka hood and pull my team over to rest. They are at last ready to stop. It is the end of day 2. Day 3. We must cross the Alaska Range. Somebody before the race kept saying it is the highest mountain range in North America, which is true, and it takes all of this day climbing and another one climbing still more to get up into the peaks. We pass through 3 more checkpoints, 2 of them villages with children running out to watch the teams come through. They are intensely curious and study each thing I do as I feed and take care of the dogs. One checkpoint is a trapper's cabin where we may stop but are not allowed inside the cabin. My team is very slow, much slower than the other teams, and I realize on this day that I will be very lucky to finish the race, let alone do well. Finishing is all I originally wanted, but the hot worm is always there, the thought that maybe your dogs are special and will prove themselves better than Rick's or Susan's or any of the other end runners. It is a futile dream, a strange thought to have, but it is there nonetheless, until this 3rd day. The mountains, the climbing and climbing, have an establishing reality. As the teams climb into the peaks above the timberline and come out at the Rainy Pass checkpoint where there are 30 or so other teams stopping to feed and rest, I have entered into a state of almost idiotic bliss. I am tired beyond belief, beyond how it is in the Army, beyond anything I have known. I am tired. But the team is moving and seems healthy, and everybody is eating and drinking, and the scenery is so beautiful that it doesn't matter how far we are behind. I am steeped in beauty. It is like going back 12,000 years running over these mountains with a dog team, like becoming a true human, a human before we became cluttered by civilization, like going inside and becoming a cave painting. We end the 3rd day in the Rainy Pass checkpoint resting. I sit on the sled and stare at the dogs while they sleep. My eyes close. When they are open again, it seems a moment. 4 hours have passed. Yogi is up, jerking around, wanting to fight, and I realize it is time to go. Day 4. Over Rainy Pass and down through the gorge, everybody warned the rookies about the gorge. also known as the Gut and the Chute. It is a 20-mile downhill run through a river gorge studded with boulders, and you run on the ice ledge steeply down, weaving in and out of the boulders for the whole distance. The other mushers tell the rookies that it is easy to get in trouble in the gorge, and it is. In a moment of sheer stupidity, worried that I will lose my team, I tie my left arm to the sled. Seconds later, I am knocked off the sled and the dogs careen down through the gorge as they loop around a boulder, but the sled does not make it cleanly and hits the boulder, and I am knocked off the runners and I cannot get up. I bounce, bang off the boulders, swing back and forth like a piece of meat. I seem to do most of the gorge run on my back, whamming boulders with the top of my head. Through a miracle of two of my stupidity in tying myself to the sled, it does not kill me. A musher stopped at the end of the gorge, fixing his broken sled, grabs my team and pulls them to stop as they pile into a small side ravine, or I think it would have been worse. Tattered, bleeding, and ragged, and stunned, I come out of the end of the gorge to crash in the next checkpoint and spend the day recovering. It is the end of day 4. Day 5. At Roan River, I take my 24-hour mandatory layover. I sleep on the ground while the dogs near a small cabin that is the checkpoint. When I have awakened, it is about mid-morning. I have about 10 hours before I am due to leave, and I find that we are on a small island in a frozen river. It is the most beautiful spot I have ever seen. The island is surrounded by mountains that shoot up to the sky. The peaks tower over the cabin, making it look like a jewel in a giant, magnificent setting. I go to the back side of the island for water for the dogs and stand level with the bottom edge of a mountain that seems to go up forever. Have to turn my head back and up to see the peak covered with snow. It is like a cathedral. My head stops aching, and the sharp pain in my ribs go down as I sit on a log and drink tea and let the beauty work into me for that whole day. Rumors tear through the checkpoint like wildfire. 1 man is missing and feared dead. 2 men are missing and feared dead. 1 woman was attacked by a moose and killed. Somebody was dragged to death coming down Rainy Pass in the gorge. None of the rumors are true, but they fly back and forth through the resting teams at the checkpoint, and I would be more worried by them except that I have been in the Army, and it has the same kind of rumor engine. Late afternoon comes, and a checker tells me I can go. The dogs fairly hum with energy, having slept and rested for a full 24 hours. I stand on the sled and reach to release the snow hook, but before I can, they lunge and break the rope, and I am gone out of the checkpoint, looking back at the snow hook as I leave. It is the end of day 5.